All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little Brandon Aiyuk 49er video as the Aiyuk contract impasse with the Niners reaches the stage of ridiculousness. But we'll talk more about it coming up next and give you our thoughts on it. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle. Go get the brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And this video is brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles, 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California. Call my friend Anthony Catania at 831-521-5264. Well, doesn't matter who you're listening to these days. Everybody's kind of saying the exact same thing, and that is that the 49ers are not close to a deal with Brandon Aiyuk, their number one wide receiver. And there's been trade talks. The Niners and Steelers have been linked in trade talks for some time. Aiyuk's trainer, TJ Hushmanzada, the former NFL wide receiver, went on 95.7 The Game in San Francisco last week and said that contract talks between Aiyuk and the Niners have so far gone nowhere. Hushmanzada was quoted as saying, at one point, he thought he may sign, so it was like, I'm not going to come out because I might have to go when I sign. And so that optimistic look has turned into a pessimistic outlook now. Like, damn, at one point he thought, hey, I might be leaving soon. So now it's like, I have no idea. So he's just one of many people now kind of saying that this deal is not coming together. Aiyuk went on TikTok and posted this morning a TikTok video captioned, "I'm laughing, but I'm crying for real." Jaden Daniels was in the TikTok video, his former teammate from Arizona State. And you see Aiyuk in the video and the TikTok saying, "They said they don't want me back. I swear." So that's what we have going on there. While this is going on, Jeremy Fowler has reported over the weekend that the two sides remain in a stalemate. On Sunday, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported on SportsCenter that Aiyuk and the Niners and the contract talks between the two sides have stalled, and there's not a lot of optimism that a deal will get done. So that's what we heard from Fowler. So we're hearing a lot of the same things from the people who claim to have sources or know Aiyuk or are privy to the negotiations between Aiyuk and the Niners. So let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, Aiyuk is clearly the Niners' best receiver. He had a great year last year. A lot of people say, well, the Niners, have the leverage because they've got the fifth-year option. But they had the fifth-year option last year on Nick Bosa, and they didn't have any real leverage on Bosa. And so what is the issue? What's the issue? The leverage isn't with the fifth-year option. It's in the fact that, the 49ers have a bevy of other offensive weapons and potentially could look Aiyuk in the face and say, hey, we can win without you. Now, the Niners clearly want Aiyuk back, but it sounds like they clearly want him back at their price or damn close to it. There's the Aiyuk quote, "They don't want me back," is likely a situation where the 49ers don't want him back at whatever his ask is. If he's asking for $30 million, $32 million, Justin Jefferson's $35 million, the Niners probably don't want him back at his number. But it's interesting. It's a lot of people have pointed out that the Niners have the leverage of having him play on the fifth-year option plus 2 franchise tags. But they had that option. They had that fifth-year option leverage supposedly with Bosa, and it really didn't materialize into leverage. So why did Bosa have leverage despite the fact that the Niners could have asked him to play on his fifth-year option, but Aiyuk has no leverage in the same situation? Well, Bosa had leverage on the Niners because the Niners couldn't replace him. He was the reigning Defensive Player of the Year award winner. You can't just plug in Austin Bryant or Robert Beal Jr. or Super Raw in his rookie year coming out of Georgia, or Drake Jackson, kind of a developmental player in his second year. You're going to throw those guys in for Nick Bosa? No. That's why Bosa had the leverage. The Niners, they had to cave to Bosa because he had the leverage. And what's driving, I think, this hardlining of negotiations with Aiyuk is the fact that Brock Purdy's contract's coming up next year, and he has all the leverage because the Niners have been looking for a franchise quarterback since Steve Young retired after the 1999 season. That's 25 years of searching for a franchise quarterback. And now they found him in Brock Purdy. And Purdy cannot be replicated by Josh Dobbs. Purdy cannot be replicated by Brandon Allen or Tanner Mordecai. You can't just say, Brock, get lost, because you can't replace him. You couldn't tell Nick Bosa, get lost, because you couldn't replace him. But the reality is that wide receivers are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but there's more wide receivers in the draft every year that goes by. The college game's gone to a full spread attack. Every year it seems like there's more and more and deeper crops of wide receivers entering the NFL draft. So it's not a supply and demand situation. It was with Nick Bosa. It will be with Brock Purdy, but it's not with Brandon Aiyuk, because you can find younger, cheaper receivers every year in the draft. And so that's what makes, the leverage that Purdy has and the leverage that Bosa had that's not what Brandon Aiyuk is enjoying right now. And that's just the bottom line. Now, we'll see if this thing gets done. There's 6 weeks to go until training camp begins. There's plenty of time to hammer out a deal. But on Sunday, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, as I said the Aiyuk contract talks with the Niners have stalled and that there's not a lot of optimism that a deal is going to get done. Now, the Niners have stated they want Aiyuk, and they want Aiyuk long-term, but they want him at their terms. He was a second-team All-Pro in 2023. He's a true number one wide receiver. He's a selfless player who will go down the field and block. But I'm getting the feeling that the Niners' strategy of just kind of waiting everybody out is going to burn them this time around. Because they could have paid Brandon Aiyuk $26 million if they had signed him a year ago. Instead, they waited, and now his price tag's 30. And every day that goes by, it's probably his price tag goes up and is closer to 30, 35, and probably will push past 35 at some point. So that's the reality of the situation. And then you look at the top 25 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL currently. Not many of them have won Super Bowl rings. I mean, if you really think about it, so you got, these are the top 25 as far as contracts. Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Michael Pittman Jr., Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Christian Cook, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. Those are the top 25 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL today. Of those top 25 wide receivers, and the money is just exploding at this position, how many of them have won the Super Bowl? Hardly any. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin got a Super Bowl together with Tampa when they beat Kansas City. Cooper Kupp got one. And then Tyreek Hill got one, but that doesn't even really count because he got one before he got paid. So of the 25 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL, 4 have won the Super Bowl. And really only 3 have won the Super Bowl while making big money. The rest of them have fallen short of the Super Bowl. So maybe paying a wide receiver $20 million or $30 million, while, you want to reward your players and you want to pay your best players, but that might not be the recipe for winning the Super Bowl. So what's going to happen here? How's this going to go? Should the Niners give in? I think that they, as far as Bosa had leverage, they had to give in. Purdy's going to have leverage. They're going to have to give in. Aiyuk doesn't have any leverage, so they don't have to give in. And my guess is that if he's going to dig in his heels and say, you know what, I want top tier wide receiver money. I want $30 million. I want $32 million. the Niners have tremendous leverage, not in the 5th-year option and the 2 franchise tags, but they got tremendous leverage in the fact that they've got Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing and Jawan Jennings and Deebo Samuel and, a deep group of backups. They have other receivers, and they had the 32nd in the NFL last year in pass attempts. So nobody passes less than the 49ers. They're a run team. They're a running team. They run and run and run and run and run. That's the way they beat you. They beat you by running the ball and playing defense. So they don't have to give in to Brandon Aiyuk, and they potentially could trade Brandon Aiyuk. Now, there's a bunch of teams out there that supposedly will, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Steelers, the Commanders, probably a few others that probably would be able to and would be willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk north of $30 million. I don't necessarily understand the Niners' thought process here. Why did you think that waiting, if you really, really were tied to, we need Brandon on our number, then why didn't you be more proactive and get it done earlier? Seems like almost waiting just kind of guarantees that you're not going to get the deal you want. You're going to wind up paying him too much. And then when it's time to pay Brock Purdy, you're going to have a hard time paying Purdy. And the reality is every day that goes by, Purdy's numbers going skyrocketing. So there's a very good chance the Niners will have to pay Brock Purdy north of $60 million a year. I mean, look at the quarterback market. It's absolutely exploded. So, as far as what's the right plan for Aiyuk, I think the 49ers are right now. I mean, they're saying all the right things. We love the player. We want him here long term. I don't think they can just stare him in the eye and say, no, you play on the 5th-year option this year at $14 million. I think there's going to be all kinds of issues and distractions and players commenting, Aiyuk commenting, guys unhappy, Aiyuk unhappy. I mean, that could really burn them if they try to just say, you know what, play on the $14 million 5th-year option and we'll deal with next year. But it sounds like, according to Matt Mayoko, that's a viable option. And the fact that Mayoko put that out there makes me think that maybe they leaked it to him. Maybe they said to him, hey, you know what? If we don't get what we want, we don't have to trade this guy. We can just let him sit on the 5th-year option. Okay, well, we'll see how that works. When there's other guys in the room that feel like you're not treating your star players well, or when there's other guys in the room who speak out and say that, the Niners ought to pay this guy more. Or what if Aiyuk has some monster game early in the season and people are like, oh, yeah, he's spectacular. Should have paid him. Niners should have paid him. I'm not sure why they didn't. And then there's all the second guessing and all the Monday morning quarterbacking and everybody who wants to question the Niners for making the wrong decision there. So what's going on here? What's going on here is it sounds like a wide receiver who doesn't have a lot of leverage and really doesn't have history on his side as far as paying wide receivers does not result for the most part in winning Super Bowls. History shows that. So you got a wide receiver who wants to be paid like a top tier guy, despite the fact that hardly any of the top paid wide receivers have ever won a Super Bowl ring. And his leverage is the Niners are inside their Super Bowl window. And he knows that, they really don't want to, trade him. They would like him to come in and play. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. And as far as what I would do in this situation, I like Brandon Aiyuk. I think he's a good player, but I don't know about you as a 49er fan, as somebody who creates content around the 49ers. I'm just tired of the whole story. And I'm not saying there's good versus evil or saying one side's wrong or right. I really don't care at this point. It's a financial dispute that involves two sides, neither of which is me. So what do I really care at the end of the day? I don't care if the Niners pay him a lot or a little. I don't care if he gets his money or doesn't. But ultimately, I think the smarter move might be to just get down the road. Just try to find a trade partner and see if you can get a decent trade haul. Now, there was rumors over the weekend that the Steelers offered a 2025 first-round pick. I don't know that I can do that straight up because I don't think I can stare the Trent Williamses and the Nick Bosas and the George Kittles in the eye and say, hey, you know what? We didn't pay, our number one wide receiver inside of our Super Bowl window. So the leverage is that the Niners are inside their Super Bowl window. And they don't want to hold out, and they don't want a top tier, their number one wide receiver, not playing for them while they're in the midst of their Super Bowl window. But they're also going to have to pay Brock Purdy in a year. They also have other, they've got a roster that's absolutely deep with star players. So, some guys like Bosa and Purdy have leverage. Debo and Aiyuk do not, as receivers in a growing, deepening receiver field. They don't have the kind of leverage that Brock Purdy has next year or that Nick Bosa had last year. So, yeah, the Niners, it looks like they've got three options. It looks like their options are they can give in and pay, but then they might not be able to afford Brock Purdy. Or they can just say, you know what, you play on the fifth-year option, but then you're angering the player and maybe ruining your chemistry in the locker room, or you can trade him. And I think there definitely are teams who are better positioned under the cap that would be willing to give you something good in return. Now, you have to get, since you're getting, now deferred gratification on this, deferred compensation. If you're the 49ers and somebody gives you a first round pick, well, that first round pick was more valuable in April when that player could have been utilized this year. That first round pick in next April's draft is not nearly as valuable. And so it may need to be more. The price tag may need to be higher than just simply a first round pick. It probably has to be a first round pick and a player that helps you win this year. But that's where the Niners are at. And it doesn't sound like this is getting done anytime soon. We have now multiple sources saying that these two sides are not close and they don't appear to be closing in on a deal. And then, you hear the Fowler report and he says contract talks have stalled and there's not a lot of optimism. And you see your TJ Hushmanzada say, I've talked to Brandon and he's not optimistic. And this all could be a gigantic leverage game between the Niners and Aiyuk, and it could get solved in the next 6 weeks and he could get signed and this and that. And the whole thing could be just a off-season discussion point. But there's also a chance that the Niners are like, you know what? We budgeted for 23 to 26. We're not going above our budget. You want 30 to 32. That breaks our budget. There's $20 million of net guaranteed difference probably in there. And the 49ers may just decide to trade him, decide to move on. So the fact that he's a wide receiver and wide receivers, for the most part, paying wide receivers has not led to the Super Bowl. I'm sure Parag Marathe and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are all keenly aware that of the top 25 highest paid wide receivers in pro football, only 4 of them have won Super Bowl rings, and only 3 of them got those rings while making big money. That's a very low percentage, and it doesn't make you want to run out and pay Aiyuk $30 million plus based on you're trying to win a Super Bowl. You're trying to keep your team together. And history says if you pay your wide receivers big money, you don't win the Super Bowl. And you already have Deebo Samuel, who's the 10th highest paid wide receiver currently in the NFL. So now you're going to have the 10th highest paid receiver and the second or third or fourth highest paid receiver. It's an awful lot of money devoted to the wide receiver position when history says teams that devote that kind of draft cap or that kind of cap room space to wide receivers historically do not win the Super Bowl. So it's going to be very interesting to see in the next 6 weeks. Does Aiyuk give in to the Niners? Do the Niners give in to Aiyuk? Do they come to some kind of middle ground agreement? Or is Brandon Aiyuk come week 1 playing for another team? I love Aiyuk. I think he's a good player, but he's also replaceable. I think you can win with him. I think you can win without him. And if you get a team offering you a player and a first-round pick, I'm taking it. I'm absolutely taking it, and I'm getting down the road. Not because I don't believe in Aiyuk, just because I think the whole saga needs to come to an end. All right, Pig and a Pickle, thanks to them for sponsoring the Krug Show. Thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles in Pacific Grove for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.